aware of that. I just want to make people aware of that. So
Okay.
I will.
One quick question before you throw us all on mute. Did you record the last one that I missed?
I did. We recorded that, and when I sent out the email for this one, it was linked at the bottom of that email with the YouTube link. So
okay, great.
Go find, if you didn't get that email, any of you, let me know. Happy to send that out your way, but we did throw that onto YouTube for you guys. I messed up the recording settings, so you're going to see all the video screens throughout, and it kind of half covers the slides. So I did send out the slide deck as well, just so that you can follow along as you're going. So quick introductions. My name is Carice. I'm the marketing manager for a log side of the business here at Sashco.
Great job with the blasting.
Whoop. I heard somebody there. We are happy to be facilitating this meeting tonight and hope we get a chance to talk shop. I'm just going to quickly introduce Bob and Mark so that you have an idea of who the heck is giving you guys all the information today. And then I'm going to mute myself and just be the one in charge of moving the slides along. So first about Mark. Mark is not with Sashco. He's with Nelson Log Restoration out of Cody, Wyoming. He started working on log homes, well, boy, what, 20 years ago, Mark?
Yeah, I think that was when I first started.
There you go. He started working at 6 years old as a residential and commercial framer with his dad. So he's been doing things like this for a long time. Anyways, he came to Zero Failures all those years ago, 2004, 2005, and has been working on log homes and a good partner for Sashco ever since. He sent me a very brief bio. I can send it on to you. It was super brief. But he's been working for years now to dial in his stain removal practices, specifically with blasting, but he's tried other things too. So we'll be hitting on all of that tonight, both Bob and Mark. Now about Bob, is a veteran of what, 40 plus years now, Bob?
Yeah, 43 years.
43 years and counting, handcrafting, log homes, finishing. He did a show for Nat Geo, Cabin Fever. He's currently president of the International Log Builders Association, the Mass Timber Alliance, very invested in the industry in general. And of course, he is also Sashco's Northeast Territory manager. So he has nothing going on. Both Mark and Bob bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to log home finishing. So glad that they're both willing to share their expertise with us tonight. So guys, like I said, I'm going to mute and I'm going to let you kind of take it away. Oh, wait, I can't mute yet. Just quickly, what we're going to cover tonight, some pros and cons of different removal methods, including media blasting, chemical stripping, power washing, just very high level, going to hit on that. And then going to go into some case studies. Bob and Mark were gracious enough to send me a whole slew of pictures of projects that they've worked on and some of the difficult things that they've come across that they've had to remove. And you guys are probably all familiar with that as well, or at least you've heard the stories from people about it. So going to go through some of those, what they learned, and then we're going to take some time to talk shop. We got best rigs. Mark's, of course, he claims his is the best. The rest of you can argue about that. What all of you have learned over the years. I know we've got plenty of people on here who've been doing this for a while and can say what has worked and what hasn't worked for them. So when we get to that point, take yourselves off mute. Let's have a good conversation and learn from each other. Because at the end of the day, there's not a ton of log home finishing contractors out there. And so we need to be sharing as much information with each other as we can. And then we'll have some time for Q&A too, as we're going through that. So, all right, Bob and Mark, I'm going to let you take it away on some of the pros and cons of the different removal methods. And I am officially unmute folks. If you have questions in the meantime, there is a chat feature there on the side of your screen. Feel free to type things in and I'll respond as I can. So take it away, guys.
Okay, thank you, Carice. Well done. Carice has put a lot of effort into doing these things, so thank you for putting all this together to start with. I think I'm going to start a little bit. Media blasting is something that I pretty much do all the time when we're doing restoration. So that is my favorite. So Mark, what do you think about, what's your favorite?
Well, pretty much I agree with you 100%, Bob. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that a lot of it also has to do with what we're choosing to put on as a final stain. I think I've made it pretty clear that many years ago, I chose to use Sashco Capture and Cascade as my primary thing. In fact, we really don't put anything else on. So because of that, when you ask Jim Barnes, what is the best surface prep method for Capture Cascade, he'll say hands down dry media blasting. So we have done other forms of stripping in the past, but I'd say 100% dry media blast now.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. You know what, the best thing to do is always get down to bare wood. And
Absolutely.
the whole idea about the wood is you want to keep it dry. If you keep it dry, you're saving time. You're not actually watering any kind of pollen that's floating in the air, any kind of spores from mold, mildew, things like that's floating around. If things are dry, they don't have any water to grow. So to me, that's always a good idea. I know other people have done a lot of other things, chemical stripping and stuff like that. I've never been a big fan of that. But weather-wise, even in the bad weather, you can get out there and put a tent over top of the building and you can sandblast, and you can run a heater in there and you can sandblast. You can't tent and put chemical stripper on in the winter because the fumes are so bad, you can hardly stand it. And the temperatures have to be pretty much equal. Otherwise, the chemical stripper starts to get blotchy. That's from my experience.
Right.
Some of it'll come off, some of it wasn't. So we'd end up doing multiple coats.
So what I'm unmuting myself. How do you like that? One thing that I'm going to make sure you guys go into tonight, over here in this weakness is obviously equipment costs are higher. Both of you can speak to that. Mark, I've got a picture of your rig at the end that we'll be going through. So you can go through, yeah, the costs are higher, but here's what I have saved in prep time because I've learned how to dial in what I'm doing for prep. We talk about surface texture can be an issue. I've seen a lot on the forum online on Facebook. I have to do the Osborne brushing afterwards. Well, what are some ways where how you can dial in your equipment so you can do less of that? So I want both of you guys to make sure that you're hitting on that. It may not be a way to totally avoid it in all situations, but let's have that discussion. And then of course, as we go into the case studies, those coatings that can be very difficult to remove. Ways to go about that. So
Well, let me throw
Hey,
out
Mark,
a few things real quick going down that list. Yes, equipment costs are higher to start with, but I did some rough figures, and we all know that if you're using a chemical stripper, there's a variety that you can use. But generally speaking, I've come up with, in my cost for blasting, because it's so much faster, and I'm just talking about the actual process of stripping, I'm at least $1 a square foot cheaper to be blasting than I am to be pressure washing or power washing or chemical stripper. Again, surface prep, surface texture, we've actually dialed in our system. So I haven't Osborne brushed in probably 3 years. I sent you a picture of what we're getting for a surface texture. And then lastly, I'm just going to touch quickly on coatings that can be difficult to remove. We've done quite a few different things. I mean, everybody's experienced with sickens and, multiple layers of paint and all that stuff. You have to view a blast system as it's just a tool, but it's the way I put it, it's like a sanding or a grinding disc. You choose the appropriate media to get the job done.
Yeah, that's
Hey, Mark,
absolutely right, Mark. I mean, I always blasted with glass, and one of the reasons I like glass, I've always used it for years, is that I know for a fact that corn cobs under pressure squirting in some of the checks and the cracks will eventually decay and cause mushrooms along with walnut shells and pecan shells and coconut shells and everything else. Anything that's natural is eventually going to decay. And I never had to go back with that. I use different types of glass bead media. So there's two types. One is a rougher glass, which is a crushed glass. The other one is actually glass beads that are round like ball bearings. That's going to give you a better surface texture if you go back over it with the ball bearings, which is a little round sand media, glass media. But that doesn't always take off the rough coatings, the hard to take off coatings. So you got to go a little bit rougher on that. I definitely agree. You know, texture is real good. Time doing that, that's great. And another thing that I liked about having my sandblaster there is I could hook up my air hose right on the end of my hose and blast that whole house off clean and blow all those checks out, blow all the media out of there, clean everything up really good. And glass media, we put tarps down and we can actually reuse that up to 3 times before it gets too fuzzy. So we just use big tarps. We use tarps that are actually the billboards you see on the side of the road. You can buy those for about $50 a piece and lay them on the ground, make sure everything's nice and dry. And you lift up the corners, get the media back in the middle, shovel it up, sift it out, use it again. And cost effective, I think that sandblasting is much more cost effective, seeing that you can reuse your media. Going back to equipment cost, I always tell people, yeah, equipment's expensive, but if I'm an auto mechanic, I want to use Snap-on tools. I want to use Mac tools because I don't want my equipment to break down, nor do I want it to slow up any of my work. So I'd rather spend more money on equipment, have equipment right, get in and out, and possibly even have maybe 2 of everything. Maybe I've got two-man lifts. Maybe I'm working 2 jobs at a time. That was always efficient to me. I did not want to have any delays. What kind of equipment do you use, Mark?
Well, that's what I was going to show you when we get to the pictures. The truck that pulls my blast trailer around also has a compressor and pod on there. So I send 4 guys to the job, and we're double teaming blasting. We have 2 blast pods going at the same time. Quickly, I wanted to address what you said about using like walnut or the organics. Agree 100% that they get injected and they rot underneath the stain. One other thing is I've always described it when I'm blasting, it feels like when you're using walnut, it's like hitting a log with a dull knife. You just beat it till the stain falls off, whereas crushed glass will cut it like a sharp knife. Yeah. But yeah, we tend to use straight up crushed glass. I've actually been kind of custom blending the coarseness of it. I run a little bit coarser than most people do because it cuts faster, and just by technique and pressures, we're able to get it just the right surface. Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing I wanted to point out is I see a lot of people in just getting started in log home blasting and stuff. I always try to tell people you have to get it to where you're getting down to that sound wood. I'll see people just strip the stain off, but they're still leaving UV damage and punky wood. So you gotta blast it until it's a proper surface.
Yeah, that's
I'm going to
correct.
go ahead and move us on to when I say quickly, let's spend a couple 3 minutes talking about power washing. It is a viable method. We're finding that it's becoming less and less popular out there, but especially on the East Coast, it tends to be utilized more because it's just more prevalent, what people are more familiar with. So it does have to be done properly. It can remove unsound wood, but it has to be done properly. And properly is, you guys are pros. The distance that you're standing away from the wood is really what matters. Otherwise, you're just giving it a power rinse, getting stuff off the surface. It can do a good job of taking chemicals that are already on their cleaners and that kind of thing. You got to dilute those. So you're going to have to use a power washer for that. It's obviously lower in upfront costs. And when used with some chemical strippers, it can effectively soften those coatings for easier removal. I'm going to bring up a competitor's product here, S100, that I know is very popular with a lot of people. They said that it works really well in conjunction with power washing. And I say, if you've dialed that in, there's people who have, like you, Mark, and like you, Bob, you've dialed in your blasting techniques, people who've dialed in their power washing techniques for what they're doing. And so I say more power to you. And we're just going to tell you every single time you make sure you have those moisture meters. That is an essential tool of the trade if you are going to be power washing. Those surfaces have to be back to their moisture equilibrium. And so if you're starting at 15%, I just tell people do a measurement before you start. If you're starting at 15%, you need to be back there before you stain again, and possibly lower depending on where you are in the country. 15% in Arizona is way too high. let's be honest about that. But 15% in coastal Alaska is pretty good. So keep in mind where you are, where you started. Osmotic pressure, that water trying to get out of a surface. Stains are breathable only to a certain extent. So you want to make sure you're setting yourself up for success if you're power washing. And of course, I've seen this far too many times. Water can enter the interior of a log home when you're power washing. And the water stains that you get, especially if those interior logs are not coated with any sort of clear coat or anything to repel the water, it is difficult to get those out and get an even appearance afterwards. Bob, I don't have any pictures of it, but I know you've had to deal with this quite a bit.
Yeah, I should have sent you some pictures. I've got quite a few pictures of that, not from my jobs, but from other people's jobs, and asking me how to take care of that. And it's pretty tough. But I want to just back up a little bit, because I think power washing and sandblasting have one thing in common that most people don't think about. It's basically how the artist holds its brush. And if the artist is holding his brush at a 90-degree angle, maybe he's left-handed, right-handed, maybe he's moving around a little bit more. Both of these require a little bit of talent. You can take a sandblaster. If it's 90 degrees and you're too close to the wood, you'll make a hole. You can take a power washer, you hold it 90 degrees, you can make a hole. Also look at your tips. There's wide fan tips, small fan tips. You know, a lot of them are numbered. Try that on some wood before you even start. A cedar home is going to be soft wood. White pine is going to be soft wood. Some of the oaks, some of the Doug fir houses, spruce houses, things like that. It's a little harder wood. Sandblasting and power washing both is going to do damage if you're not familiar on what you're doing. I guess I'll talk just a little bit about power washing. I am a fan of power washing. I think that's pretty good, but I don't quite agree with some of the ways people interpret it, how to do power washing. I always say, you know, Sashco does make a house cleaner. It's a good one to use, but whatever house cleaner you're using, it's like going through the car wash. If you're not rubbing and washing the car and you're driving through and it's just getting wet, when the water dries, it's still dirty. I always recommend, every time I talk to somebody, every time they ask me a question, buy yourself a car wash brush, wash the house, and then use the power washer over top of that. If you're not scrubbing the house and you're just using a pressure washer, you're probably only doing half of what you should be doing. So that's my opinion about that. Mark, what's your experience?
Well, I agree with you on all that, Bob. There is three big things that jump out to me as a contractor. Basically, again, to me, they're just straight up weaknesses for power washing. Watering, entering the house is a big one, because one of the first things we do when we get to a house is if there's failed chinking and caulking, we tear it out. So we're actually blasting or stripping after some of that chinking has been pulled out. Now, worst case scenario, we get some dust and some glass inside the house that we can vacuum or sweep up fairly easily, but we're not damaging somebody's, you know, oak floor, furniture, or anything else with water getting in there. Secondly, as we pull up to the job, you know, I've got 7 or 8 guys working for me at different times. We're immediately after we blow off the walls, we're ready to turn right around and start spraying actually Timbor and then Color Fast. And then I also agree with you 100% on technique. I've seen a cob blasted house, again, is a shame, but the logs were actually ruined because of the technique. So I agree with you on all of it and everything you've said. You got to know your tools.
Got to know your tools, and you got to practice a little bit with technique. And, you know, if you got a harder area, you move in a little closer. If it's coming off pretty easy, you move back a little bit. If it's coming off kind of layering, you start working at a 45-degree angle. Maybe you get down to a 30-degree angle, work that log and get underneath the stain and kind of peel it off a little bit. And you need to keep it moving all the time. It's not just in a one position. You know, a lot of guys go back and forth. Some guys go in a circle all the time, a little bit of a circle, but you got to keep it moving. Everybody is different. I've never seen two guys use the same method. I always see something a little bit different. And again, it's just like an artist. They're going to hold their brushes in a different spot. So I do agree, going back to that water and stuff that's inside the house, just think if you're using chemical strippers, now it's not just water going inside the house. Even if the wall is finished, now you're pushing stripper inside the house. That's actually doing more damage. And I would rather pay either my guys or a cleaning company to go back in and vacuum up and clean dust, you know, from a sandblaster anytime than cleaning damage and have to refinish walls, floors,
Yep.
things like that, because there's no easy way to do that. And you get run lines on the inside from those chemical strippers. You end up sanding interior walls, and you can't just do one spot on the wall. You got to do the whole wall. And if you're lucky, one wall is all the damage you have. If you have a lot of walls, you're going to spend more time and money fixing what you've done. It's going to be more than what the job was on the exterior.
Yep. All right,
We
so that
just
was
did-
7 minutes. So I'm moving us along, guys, because we
Okay.
don't have a set amount of time. So let's get into some of the case studies, some of the things that you guys have seen that have made it, you know, removal difficult, and you know, what you did about it. So first one, these pictures are from Mark, and I actually have one from Bob down here too, and I'll just go through all of them. But I combined these into one. Both improper prep before a stain was applied and poor or no maintenance being done on the surface. So this first one is from Mark. Go ahead and give us a little bit of the information on this cabin. This is obviously before pictures. You can see all that in here.
Yes, this was a picture as we saw it. So the homeowner hired another contractor to strip with, and he used a power wash system. He stripped an oil-based stain and then applied capture and cascade. And then less than 5 years, when she contacted us, the stain was just falling, the capture was falling off in sheets. And so again, hate to do this to her or anything else, but we had to go back and strip it all the way down to bare wood. And as we were blasting it, the capture was flying off in 6-inch pieces. I mean, just not bonded at all. And then the really bad news was that the chinking, which you see there, was, you know, freshly done. Again, should have been last time done for a long time. The chinking was bonded to the capture. So all the chinking, you literally just pulled out with your fingers. So that was, to me, that was a prime example of improper prepped, and it caused a very good product to fail.
Yeah, improper prep can also be done on brand new houses as well.
Absolutely.
Even if you have a brand new house, it's fresh wood, you still need to prep that house. And that's a mistake that a lot of contractors make that aren't really in the business of, you know, staining houses and refinishing. They just forget to prep the wood a little bit. I mean, if you're making furniture, you sand it and you make sure that you're gonna, you know, get the finish done so it sticks. So you have to do the same thing on bare wood.
So moral of the story, if you're going to be power washing, you have to make sure you're getting everything off of there. Something else that I notice about these logs is they look very smooth.
Yes.
So I wonder if they really just power rinsed, because there
Yes.
should be some texturing there after power washing. Or if they, you know, if they power washed and did any sanding afterwards, if they sanded everything pretty smooth afterwards. You do not want baby butt smooth on a log home exterior. Interior, you know, not as big of a deal, but an exterior, that texture really matters.
There's no way that they sanded it afterwards. They basically power rinsed it, like you said.
Yeah. Bob, what about this one?
Yeah, that was a cabin that I purchased up in Upper Michigan, and again, this was a big investment for the people that had this cabin, but they invested heavily in the log cabin and very weakly in the finish aspect of that. And they bought a very inferior product on that. Didn't do anything with it. Didn't prep the wood before they put the product on, and basically did one coat on that whole cabin. And you can see where it's failing. You know, the upper curvature is collecting all the dirt, the mold, the mildew, the UV rays, everything. And this is about 10 years of one coat of inferior product underneath of a porch. So this was underneath of an overhang porch, which is pretty bizarre.
It's pretty bad. I would also, because it would be shameful of me to not say something, but these chink joints, way too narrow. Just so you know, for the amount of movement those logs are going to undergo. If you do them this narrow, expect to do a lot of repairs.
Yep.
Yeah, so this
And that's
particular,
more business for us, right? We'll take your speaking purchases, but if you would rather save your time and money,
yeah,
widen
this
those joints a bit.
particular job not only had chink in some of the places, it also had caulk in other places, silicone in some of the other places, and it had a variety of whatever the local hardware had to
Yep.
do that. So a little bit of difference what a professional would do compared to what a homeowner that doesn't do his research would do.
Okay, so when you're going through and removing this, guys, what do we need to look out for when you go back in for, to restain? Like, Bob, does cleaning also need to happen in order to make sure that all those mold spores are killed, or can they just blast and get all of that off?
Sandblast is going to get all of that off. And then of course, using Tembor products with the borates is going to help. So, we'll sandblast that. And sometimes I sandblast twice, once with a coarse media, then I go over top of that with a real fine media. That does what sanding would do, but it does it 10 times faster just by changing the media. And then, I like to do a good 2 coats of Tembor. I mix my Tembor kind of strong. In the checks, I've always put Tembor in the checks, sometimes in the powder form, or I've also done it in a liquid form by putting it in a dish soap bottle. Paul had mentioned that he puts it in a old ketchup bottle and squirts it in, same type scenario. But I love to get that Tembor in there. Tembor is a must on bare wood, any bare wood. So then after that, we would basically get ready and put our stain on that. I don't think it's going to need much prep after the second go around with the sandblaster.
Couple things I'll throw out there is that, like I said earlier, we actually blend our media, and that's how we're getting some of the surfaces that we want. So instead of going twice around the house, we're using a blended mix, and that gives us a great finish. And then somebody asked a question, I missed who it was, if that darker top would stay there and show up after, when you're reapplying the stain. Like I said, if I've seen people that haven't properly blasted and there's UV damage on the top of the logs, yeah, it'll show up. So you actually have to blast the darker part, the UV damage, till you're down to sound wood, and then it does not show up.
That's right, white wood. Yep, exactly.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right. So next case, stubborn and multiple layers of paint. This is another one that Mark sent to me, but I got one from Bob here too. That's just lovely. That's one of my favorite pictures. Never, ever paint. I will go back to that other one, and it's not because paint isn't breathable. You guys can ask me for that white paper. Sashco has a whole white paper on how it's really not the breathability of paint that is the issue. It is actually the fact that it hides developing problems. But let's go back to this one here, Mark, and talk us through this stubborn and multiple layers of paint. Sorry for my slide switching skills tonight. I'm a little punchy.
Which one do you want to talk about, the barn or this one right here?
Oh yeah, I went too far, didn't I? There we go. You can talk about the barn.
Okay, first of all, this was an old historic barn that was built right around the turn of the century. It was the second log barn built in Northwest Wyoming. So obviously they're old logs. They've been pretty much have done everything to it. This is a first big, I'd say big one for me, where it's like I was blasting with coarse glass and I just could not cut through that stuff. If any of you have blasted paint, you'll see that it rubberizes, kind of turns to balls, and you just can't get the stuff to strip well. So I don't tell a lot of people this, and I'm going to throw out a caveat there: exercise extreme caution if you do that. But we wound up mixing 2 parts glass to 1 part copper slag, and again mixed it before we put it in the pot. and the copper slag hit with enough velocity and weight that it actually cut through the paint, and then the glass would just give us a good texture. So I was pretty nervous when I started because this is one that, like I said, it's a pretty valuable old barn, but the results we got were just fantastic.
So Mark, take us into the extreme caution. Why with coal slag? What's the issue?
Well, coal slag is a very heavy, dense, it's up there, same thing. Copper slag, coal slag is basically the same. Some guys know it as black beauty. It's really designed for stripping paint off of steel. You know, if you're doing an old industrial trailer or something like that, it'll cut through the paint really well. And it's just very aggressive on logs. That's what I would say. If you asked me before I ran into this job, I'd say you never use something like that on a log home. And again, I think there's one other time we did it. But it's a rarity. And again, if you don't have your technique down, you will absolutely ruin the logs. That's the fastest way right there. It's just very aggressive media.
So Bob, tell us about this job and what you had to go through to get all this paint off of here, and also some log replacement.
Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is the roof line at that door. You notice that roof line comes together and it's creating a valley, and it's collecting water from both roofs, dumping into the one spot, which is right on the deck. So not only did it rot the whole bottom of the door out, it also rotted out with the backsplash the first 2 or 3 courses of logs. Looking at those logs right now from this picture, the bottom one looks like it's a little bad. But if you take a pencil and you poke it into the second one up, your pencil will go in there 3 or 4 inches, because the paint creates the illusion that you can't see rot on the inside. So that was kind of a big project, building right on the ground. A lot of the houses that were built back in the 30s and 40s, especially in the Northeast, Michigan, particular, they were built right on a slab, right on the ground. They poured a slab and they started building right on that. And it was 3-inch slab. So a lot of these houses, the concrete failed as well. So one thing of caution I want to mention, seeing we're talking about paint, is that you need to take extra precautions with paint and do a lead test, because if there's lead in that paint, you cannot remove that lead, and you really have to be careful. You might have to tent the lead. If you're within 500 feet of water, you have to get special permits from the DNR, and you also have to have a lead abatement license and training. So you have to be certified for lead abatement. So be real careful with all of this. The little lead kits are about $19 a piece. And if you take a job and it's got this and you get into that job, you own it. And just to get rid of that lead and the bags and the stuff you have to do might add another $25,000, $30,000 to the job. If you don't take care of it and it goes into a river or a water and the DNR come out and they take a little check with that, or environmental agency takes a check of that, you might be fined $10,000 a day to clean up the whole lake. So be very cautious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a little bit much. So
Yes, they want you to take it serious.
don't just go blasting paint off. That's the moral of the story.
That's your paint for sure. And any paint, make sure, and even stains, make sure that your employees are equipped properly. They've got to have the right mask, a face mask on. They have to have a dust mask on for the type of dust that you're taking off. So check that out. Make sure you're following OSHA requirements, because all you need is a competitor that's a little upset because they didn't get the job to call the OSHA guy on you, and then you have a bunch more problems. So make sure that stuff is available. Your MSD sheets are available, and you know what kind of paint you're taking off. You know what kind of products you're putting on.
Perfect. So tell me something, both of you. If you were to go and blast this area of decay without replacing the logs, what would happen? Blasting or power washing?
The blasting would remove all the decay. If there's not much left of that tail, it would pretty much be eaten off. That's basically another thing I say about proper surface prep. We actually use our blaster a lot of time. We have a little spot of pocket rot or something, running out of a check or something. We blast that decayed area away until we get down to sound wood. So if that tail's shot, the media blasting will just take it. It'll be gone when you're done.
So you could collapse a house if you haven't done a proper inspection,
Theoretically, yes,
dealt with that, right?
that's correct.
Which
Actually,
could be fun to watch and also expensive.
yeah, actually, I wanted to touch on what Bob brought up, and actually, the next slide you have, what we did in the Teton Park is a prime example, and that picture you see on the left is actually very minute compared to what we ran into. But Bob, you talked about several things about the overhang not covering the tails. When you look at the picture on the right, that's what they wanted when we were done, and all of the tails were exposed. Of course, it was all painted, the Forest Service brown. That building is actually the 9th oldest log structure in Grand Teton Park. They called it building number 9, or Beaver Creek number 9. But anyway, yes, all the things Bob said about lead abatement it's scary. And I'm going to give a quick shout out to Shannon Martinson. I know he's listening on here. He's my abrasive supplier. Everything I do, I buy through him. And there is ways that you can mitigate and blast lead paint, but it's generally speaking, it's so expensive that us normal guys can't actually do that. But for example, vapor blasting using a water to collect your dust, contain your dust, you can do that. But what Bob was touching on, that's exactly right. You've really got to test and know if you have lead or not.
So
Park Service is actually pretty famous about putting that heavy brown paint on everything, and then they wonder why the logs rot so quickly. And they're not willing to change, nor are they willing to do any maintenance on that project until it's beyond help. And then they call someone in to go that. They just don't have the budgets for it.
how many buildings did you do, Mark?
We really focused on the one. We were looking at another one that kind of fell through on our end, but on just this building, you see it on there, we replaced 37 log tails, 37 of those tails. And then again, there was multiple repairs. Most of the tails we pulled off had already been put on by another contractor previously. They went back over with thick paint that would just flake off and allow water to get in behind it and just rot the tail. And again, this is where that paper came up from Sashco with Bob, and I can't remember who all was involved. Lots of people involved in writing that paper. And we actually convinced the Teton Park to go back on all these tails that are exposed. They're covered with capture that matches that. So if you look, all of those tails that you see right there are stained with capture cascade, but the logs to the right are actually painted. I think we did an excellent job of matching color, and then all those tails are exposed. So right now, the National Park Service is actually keeping a close eye on this building to see what kind of life they're going to get out of the capture stain, fully exposed.
All right. Well, I guess the moral of the story, you guys are going to have to remove all of this stuff one way or the other.
Yep.
Know what you're getting into from a rot perspective. And if that's something that you don't have experience doing, you need to bring in somebody who does. And
Bob knows his stuff.
Replace logs is not a little thing. I just had someone ask a question: how do they remove and replace the tails? And I said, that's another webinar. that's another hands-on. There's a whole lot that goes into that. But I'm adding it to the list because we've had a few requests for that. There's more and more need for log replacement coming up as people start to do these inspections and find that there's a lot more that has to be done than just blasting off a surface and replacing and doing new stain or whatever. So
the house we just finished, the two things, when Bob was talking earlier about being able to blast in the winter, we started this house January 5th, and then tying in with rot, it was about a 3,000 square foot log home, full scribe. We replaced approximately 175 feet of rot.
Wow, that's a lot.
Log repair is a huge side of our business now.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we think we need some more discussions on repairing this rot is because a lot of the applicators that Sashco runs into, and that I've known in the past, lose a job because they don't know how to fix rot or replace a log.
Correct.
And the reason they don't know is they don't know where to go to get the education to do that. So, this
We're
is something that's important.
We're happy to provide it. It requires some hands-on too, I think. Now, Bob and Mark, you might disagree with me, but we know people, so we're happy to share names of people and get you in touch with them. If for no other reason, those of you who don't do log replacement and aren't interested in learning that, there are pros around the country who can help you out and could subcontract for you. We've got a few people who have pivoted away from doing log home finishing into doing primarily log replacement because there's a big market for it. So
there's two things that to me are critical to this. Actually, I used to build log homes, so that was a huge part of it. Was you have to know how it's built, number one, and secondly, and I know Bob will agree, unless I hate to say it, but you have to have years of actually running a chainsaw to do it effectively.
right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move along. Multiple layers of oil-based products. I'll say Sickens because Sickens no longer exists. It's now PPG Prolux, right? But we've heard this: multiple layers of Sickens, multiple layers of Australian timber oil, multiple layers of TWP, multiple layers of Chevron shingle oil. It runs the gamut. How in the world do you get those things off?
This is another prime example, and I'm going to add one other thing. This was one building I was going to talk about when we were talking about getting water inside. This lady right here has the largest private collection of fine Western art. There was 2 paintings in there. Each painting was worth 1.5 million, and we were nervous. But anyway, that had multiple layers of Sickens, and we blasted that off. Again, I run a coarser glass than most people, and the coarse glass stripped the Sickens off, and then with it kind of blended with the meat, the finer glass, it gave us a really good finish. So this one was, I will say I used double what we normally it was 9,000 square foot of surface area. Typically we'd use right at about 9,000 pounds of media. We used 18,000 pounds of media on this job.
Wow.
That makes
So
makes you laugh, but it's true. It takes more. It's not just when you guys think about this, when you're going out there to do an assessment of a job and you have to take off multiple layers of something that's difficult, you can't use the normal amounts of
Correct.
media or the normal amounts of chemical stripper. It might take 2 applications of the chemical stripper to get that off, right?
That's correct.
More water. Are you going to run a well dry if you're going to be power washing? Those are all things that when you're going out to bid these jobs, you have to have in mind and make sure that you are, as much as you can, explain that to these people. Because I know that you guys get a lot of homeowners who say, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. And they're going to go to the painter down the street and get a cheaper bid. And they're going to wonder why the heck your bid is so high. Be prepared to explain to them why, not just how you're going to do things, but why your processes are better. Because when you can do that, you're selling them confidence in your expertise, and they're going to be more likely to do it right.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And not only is your process better, but the products that you use, you're more educated with the products. And even though Sickens isn't around, it was a very popular product, especially in the Northeast and through the country. But what was happening is logs are not lumber. Logs move. They move with the weather. They expand. They shrink. Everyone is definitely going to shrink no matter what it is. And you open up these little checks and water gets behind that film forming stain and it peels. And if you explain that to the customers and let them know that you're educated, some other products might work better, that's kind of the way to go. Why do the same thing again and use the same stuff and there again in another 10, 15 years?
Right.
Let's solve the problem.
Notice real quick on the left picture down below that big window, notice how dark those 2 logs are right there. That was, again, less than 5 years. I think it was 3.5 years after Sickens had been applied. And those logs, according to the owner, they didn't look like that when they put on the Sickens. So PPG. But basically, there's just a lot of UV damage and a lot of rot already starting on that log.
So, another reminder, never build right next to the ground.
Correct.
If you can avoid it.
Sprinkler systems keep us in business.
Yeah, bring sprinklers and leaking water spigots, right?
And
Correct.
drip line from the roof.
Sorry, say that again, Bob?
Drip line from the roof, water dripping off the eaves, backsplashing.
Yeah.
Big problem. I see some big rocks in the picture on the right. I can't tell if there's a gutter. It doesn't look like a gutter on that house, but if water comes down, hits that.
They actually did have gutters on it. We took that picture before they reinstalled the gutters.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
So quickly discuss also, Mark and Bob, I know this was a question that came up on the forum the other day. This tongue and groove up here, are you blasting that as well? And if so, how are you adjusting when you blast tongue and groove?
Again, technique, you just back off a little bit, hit it a little lighter.
That's right. Experience is actually going to help you a little bit with that. We blast all that off. We blast off the fascias and the soffits, and sometimes we'll even tape off and the aluminum window trim, and we'll actually blast off a lot of the casings and that on the outside too, just because it's a lot easier to do that than it is any method.
If you notice in the right picture, so again, we taped off around the windows. In the right picture, we blasted that trim in between the windows and went back with a green color. So that everything you see there, everything wood was blasted.
So what mill thickness are you using? Are you putting plastic sheeting? Are you doing cardboard?
Yes.
What are you putting around here?
What we found that works the best is we start off on this, whether it's the aluminum frame or the glass or whatever, our first layer is we use the 3M non-residue tape. We put that down first. Then we use a 6 mil plastic, and then we use Gorilla Tape to hold the 6 mil plastic on. You can lightly, very lightly, if you screw up, you can brush the plastic and not cut all the way through it. Obviously, if you hit it hard, it's going to cut right through it. But we have not etched a window. We haven't taken any, paint off of a metal trim or anything since we started doing that technique. It does take quite a while longer to mask off windows, but what we do, we leave the plastic there until we're done staining. So it's a one-time mask.
Okay, so how much time would you say it generally takes you? This is a larger project, obviously, average size home to do the masking. And then how long does it take you to, how quickly can you get a job done if you're not having to do that secondary prep? You've dialed in your blasting, Mark. You don't have to do the Aussies. How quickly are you getting the job done? Well,
we did, again, that 3,000 square foot floor house. I don't remember what the surface area was. Back to your window prep, it takes one guy close to an hour. I factor in an hour to mask the windows correctly. But by the time we blast, blow off, timbor, color fast, 2 coats of captured, 1 cascade, fill checks, and chink, we did a 3,000 square foot home in a little under 4 weeks. There was, it was actually closer to 3 weeks because we had 2 weeks of log repair on that one.
2 weeks of log repair.
I've actually, with my blast system, we average 500 square feet an hour, even on stuff like this Sickens. I've gone as high as we've hit 1,000 square feet an hour blasting before.
Wow. Here's another case, same thing, multiple layers of oil-based products, but look at those runs. What in the world happened here?
This one's kind of funny to me. This is a homeowner maintained home, and great guy, good friend of ours now. We gave him a bid, and he thought, oh, that's way too much money. And he went out there with an orbital sander and he sanded literally about 4 feet and called us back. So it was, and it was like that. He kept reapplying whatever he could find, whatever the hardware store was recommending that year, so on and so forth. So who knows what was on there? It was everything.
Oof, that's a whole lot. So, I guess to say, hand sanding, we have some pros who do that. It's just what they prefer. And again, they've dialed in their system generally with Osborne brushes, but it takes a lot more elbow grease to do that than I think a lot of people realize. So-
One thing I will say, and Chris, I don't know if you have that picture I sent you of our finished surface, but I'm actually, again, I think it's really simple for me. I'm kind of a simple guy. When Jim Barnes says that a rougher texture, a media blasted surface area helps capture bond better, I'm doing that.
There
And
it
so
is.
we actually, we there it is. Yeah, that is just blasted. That was a weather wall on an old D-log home. It had same ranch. It had multiple layers of sickens. We blasted it off, and it's a nice sound wood, dry wood, but a little rougher texture. By the time you apply, everything we're doing, it actually, I've had homeowners come back and say, oh, that's a lot smoother than I thought it would be. But great surface bonding right there.
Right. And so that, believe it or not, that texture is good. I know some people see that and they kind of freak out a little bit because it at least for the moment may not look as loggy, but once you get the stain on there and it starts to highlight that grain, it works really nicely on the exterior.
Yes, exterior.
Right. So I'm going to go back here quickly. Bob, this is yours. I don't think I thought Transformation was shiny. This is like over the top.
So this here was a project up in Everett, Michigan, belonged to a lady. Her husband actually built this house. These logs are all dug first. She had him, they had these on a railroad car all the way from British Columbia, shipped into Michigan. And beautiful logs, nice job. Some of these logs are 30 inches in diameter. And they're all pretty good all the way up to like 28 inches or so. But this is the product that they put on this house. And after years and years of using this same product, building up, you could actually take a pencil and poke into some of those logs where they were rotted.
Wow.
And it's a very expensive job to do. I referred a couple of people to help out on that, and definitely asked them to use a different product, explain the reason why. And then also when I do house inspections and that, notice the windowsill on this house. What's different about that? Where do you see a taper on that windowsill, or is water running off or running into the window? So there were so many things that, some people just really don't look at, that sometimes it's worth having an inspection done on the house to get some recommendations. Now, while we're on this picture right here, I want to back up to some of that prep. And this is just a little tip that maybe some of the guys will pick up on. Mark, you might like this, but I didn't use plastic on all of my stuff. What I would do is I used like Luan, which is a thin 1/4-inch paneling, the plywood stuff. A lot of times you can get cover sheets from this stuff that you can get for $2, $3 at the lumber yards. They're chipped, they're broke. But what I would do is I would actually take a product called M-Seal, which is a tape that a lot of the manufacturers use to stack logs up on the tongue and grooves. I would put M-Seal all around that window trim, screw on, whether it's one piece or maybe it'd be 2 or 3 pieces left over from another job, as long as they're overlapping like a shingle would overlap. Then I take finished screws and I just screw those into the log to hold that against the window. Now, what's nice about that, takes very little to take apart. You can blast the heck out of it. You're not blasting through anything. It's not collecting condensation when you put plastic on a window. If it's a humid time like it is in the Northeast, you get condensation under the plastic. Plus, everything on there is reusable except for the M-Seal, which comes off very easily. You just pull it right off like tape. And that plywood you can use from job to job to job. And it doesn't have to be one piece for one window. You can use several pieces on the window, let them overlap a little bit. My guys like that. Easy.
I don't know what's the price of lumber having quadrupled, if you'll be able to get them for $2 or $3 a piece anymore.
Probably not.
No. So Bob, my questions for you on this. I'm a dummy. I don't finish log homes for a living. I just sell the products. I market the products for them, right?
Yep.
If I came up to this home, I'd say it looks like it's in pretty good shape. What are the tools you're taking around to do that inspection? What are the telltale signs? And then that show you that there's going to be an issue. And then secondly, did you blast this all off, and what did it take?
Yeah, it was pretty tough to do. So one of the things I'm looking at is I'm looking at that deck, and I know that this is Michigan and it snows in Michigan. So I look at the deck and I said, well, geez, is there any snow sticking on that? So that already gives me a key indicator that the bottom log, I might want to check. And what I usually use is I've got a pocket knife, a little jackknife that I use. I poke into those logs. Sometimes I look at the cracks and you can see that the checks that are in the logs, some are even minute. A lot of the times what you're going to see is that the outside edge of that log is going to be very hard. But if you tap that, and I will tap that, I just use a little ball peen hammer, believe it or not, the flat side of a ball peen hammer. And I don't use a claw hammer because sometimes the tang of the claws make a different noise. But a ball peen hammer, and I just tap on that a little bit and you can tell if it's solid or it's not solid. If you have any questions, you can always drill a hole and plug the hole back up with a little bit of conceal. If you got a 3/8 drill and you're drilling a hole in there, pretty soon the drill just goes in about a foot after the first ½ inch, you know the center of that log is rotten. And these are the kind of things that homeowners are willing to pay for during an inspection and appreciate when you go through and do that. But I'm looking at those floor joists at the top. Those are tails that are hanging out past that house. Those are very susceptible to rot, decay. I know that from experience. I look at some of those. Some of those were rotted all the way through into the house. The only thing that was holding them together was the multiple layers of Australian timber oil that build up a big surface, kind of like super glue over the top and covered it back up. But experience, and that might be another one of these webinars that we could go through, is actually take a house and pick out maybe what we're going to look at. Yep. If we're going to inspect the house, what do we look at? Where's the key spots to look at? What logs do you look at first? Where would you expect problems to come from? Things like that. So a lot of it just takes experience. My main experience is in handcrafting, but you know, we've built several manufactured home kits over the years, probably 70, 80 of them anyways. But yeah, there's a lot of things. And with that knowledge on how everybody else does stuff, you kind of pick up a lot.
So don't judge a book by its cover or a log home by its shininess.
Right. I wanted to chime in just a little bit on what Bob was saying, because a lot of what he's saying is, I mean, everything he's saying is dead on, but what he's really hitting on is experience. You get used to looking at something like that. There's no flashing where the bottom log meets the foundation. You know, you can see the microchecks in the stain. Again, you start to develop where you're just automatically looking for those problem areas. And a lot of it is experience. There is another, and it's just, my brain is not working right now on this, but there's a meter out there that you can, it has 2 prongs. You drive it into the log and it'll give you a density reading. So you can actually, I've actually been wanting to get one of those, but everything I do right now with our inspections, because we're looking at just bidding the house for the homeowner, is done virtually identical with what Bob's saying.
Yeah, I have one of those little guys, and I just call it a ping machine. There's a funny name for it, but what it's like is like sonar. So basically, that's the density. It'd be the same thing that they use for compactions on highways and things like that to test how compact the soil is. It measures the distance between the sound. So a very soft area is going to absorb more sound. A solid area is going to bounce sound quicker. That's how they work.
Interesting. Thanks for that. I'll when I send out the email with the link for this recording, I'll see if I can include some more information on that tool. Okay, last case, and we're beyond time. So if you need to jump off, we're still recording, but we'd love for you guys to stay on with us. This is my favorite. My 5-year-old could chink better than that.
That's one of our quality jobs right there.
Right. We actually, Sashco donated the chinking for this 4-H camp up in Wyoming. Who proceeded to hire, I found out it was a friend of a friend, to do the chinking. They didn't have chinking guns. They didn't have even like grout bags. They were literally picking up out of the bucket and slathering it in there. And so they said, we need somebody to do the job. So I sent Mark up to him. And Mark, please explain all of the things that you're going to have to do to remove this. I should have pulled up the broader picture. I have never seen a worse chinking job. I think they used something like 4 buckets on an area of wall that was like 10 feet wide and 20 feet high. It was insane.
Yeah.
How are you going to remove all this?
Well, not easily, I'll tell you that. Bottom line is we all know that nothing really strips log jam off. We have to hand scrape, or actually, little side note, I do a little blacksmithing, so I'm going to make some actual cutting tools that fit into impact hammers and power it with our air compressor to basically chisel that stuff off there. But we have to do a lot of scraping and grinding first, and then we're going to blast it. So we're actually slated to do that job July 5th this year. So I don't know if I'm looking forward to it or not. It's going to be a handful.
So
My absolute nightmare. Crease, this is Renee. You know.
yeah, it was not
Rough night.
fun.
Oh
When
my
I
gosh.
talked to them, I said, all right, let's see, because they didn't want to have to hire somebody to do it. They had already hired to redo it. They already had hired somebody to do it. And I said, well, you scrape, I sent them some of the tools from Schroeder Log Home Supply sells these scraping tools. I forget what they're called, but they're just log scrapers. They got one of those that didn't touch it.
They had
I
they had
said,
about 8 to
try to
10 of them.
scrape it out, and the chemical strip, they tested that also didn't touch it.
That's because it's such a darn good product. That's
Nice.
why.
Absolutely.
I
So a
told
little note-
everybody no sales pitches. But
So anyways, a little note, when we get projects where we have to remove chinking and things like this, Makita makes a power tool for that. It's actually, I don't know what the name of it's called. It's actually a power chisel. And
Yeah.
they use it for taking off ceramic tile with a wide blade on that. And you can actually develop a blade or whatever, or take that same blade and just sharpen it up a little bit and go right down there, and it takes it right off real easy.
This one's a little bit more beyond that. We actually, a lot of times we'll use, fine tools or flush cut tools with scraper blades to strip normal chinking. But when you run into something like this,
I
it's
agree.
a little more aggressive.
I agree.
you say a little bit beyond that. That's a
Little bit. We used to have a saying about the 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 finger chink joint, and this one goes way beyond everything I've seen.
And I guess what you guys, as you're coming along, you see a job where you've got some, milking from chinking that's dripping down the logs, and you're going to ask, how can you remove that? Well, on bare wood, obviously can sand down to bare wood. On stained wood, you still have to sand down to bare wood. So don't let that happen and let it dry. Is
Those are actually fingerprints right there, Crease.
oh, lovely. Like I
It looks
said,
like
I
a
think my
handprint.
5-year-old
Yep, there was handprints too.
Oh my God.
This was a unique one, but wanted to let you guys know, when we're talking removal, when you see something, usually you aren't going to see anything this bad.
Hopefully.
But when you do see something that bad, again, all the methods that you can come up with, you're going to have to employ every single one of them. Blasting does not work to remove chinking.
Nope.
It's so elastic, the blast media just bounces right off. So don't even attempt that. It's kind of ridiculous. All right, we're getting here to the end. It is now time to talk rigs. This is probably what everybody is most excited about. Okay. This is Mark's blasting rig. That's pretty impressive. This was a picture from another contractor of his power washing rig. He's got the Hotsy. If you're power washing, you're going to get much better results with hot water, just so you know. This one you can upstream chemicals as well. So pretty impressive, and probably works pretty well. There's a lot of money in that. When you're first starting out, you may not have that kind of investment to make. You got to work your way up to that. I'm sure Mark and Bob, both of you guys kind of experimented with rigs over the years. So give us a little bit of history on what you have used and what you learned about those rigs and how to dial them in as best you could before you got to this, $40,000 investment here, Mark.
Well, I'll go real quick. First of all, just like my partnership with Sashco, which again, I'm not sponsored by Sashco or anything. I'm just a firm believer, and we've developed a relationship. Abrasive blast supply out of Minnesota is with Shannon. Shannon's my abrasive supplier. I actually went down the path and spent a lot of money on inferior rigs and inferior blast pots until I finally met with Shannon, and basically he's helped me. Between the two of us, we've actually designed this system working together. I could spend 4 hours just talking about blast systems. It's very complex. It is a system, but one of the things that most people don't understand is all of my pots are both pressure hold pots. It means you let off the dead man. It doesn't dump the entire pot of air, so it's quicker on and off the trigger. Also up here in Wyoming, we're at 5,300 feet right here. I do a lot of jobs that are, in the 7,000, 8,000 foot range. Elevation is a big part. That big compressor on the back, that Kaiser, that's a 375 CFM. Again, you got to know what you're trying to do, where you're trying to do it, have enough air. Air is the key to blasting areas. If you notice also, both of my pots are hard mounted. Those are 6.5 cubic foot pots. We can blast for 2 hours without refilling. And we were honestly, again, I thought I was kind of stupid. Shannon had to smack me upside the head. He's like, why are you dragging the pot around the house? Drag a blast hose. So that reel on the back has 300 feet of blast hose on it. And so we can get to anything. And again, one of the things that I did just earlier this year, that's a heavy trailer. We needed a decent sized truck. That's a Dodge 5500 that pulls it. So I thought, well, I'm driving a truck. Why not put another compressor, another pot, and everything else? That's what we did. As I'm looking at it again real quick, notice that between the compressor and the hose reel, there's that little blue thing right there. That's an air dryer. You have to have dry air, especially you guys southeast, northeast, that have a lot higher humidity. We're in a very dry climate. We still pull gallons of moisture off as we're blasting throughout the day. You mix water with crushed glass, especially the finer stuff, you've got concrete in the bottom of your pot. So if anybody wants to talk to me, I could talk for hours about how and why.
Literally, he is not even joking about that. And if you guys are interested in a separate webinar all about rigs, I'm sure I could get Mark and Bob back on the line. I've got some guys who've really dialed in their power washing, who I'm sure would be happy to join us to discuss that. And we can have a webinar all about rigs and talking the technicalities. I have no expertise on that at all, but I'm happy to gather the people to do that. So shoot me an email, put it here in the chat. Let me know if you're interested in that.
Bob, what would be your best guess? Sorry, Chris. What would be your best guess on what that hot seat rig is there? That's probably 25, pushing 30,000.
I was told 24.
Okay.
After all was said and done, and this was out in he's in West Virginia. So there's a guy out in West Virginia. Actually sold all of this because he got out of the business. He sent me a picture when he was selling. So this was
that's a big difference from a $1,500 power washer you buy at Home Depot.
Absolutely. And same, he'd say the same thing, dialing in, and he got really good at dialing in his chemicals that he would use and the cleaners that he would upstream. I think Wayne Bell is on the call here. He's really done a great job of dialing in that system for them. So I'm sure he'd be willing to talk shop.
Knowing that Wayne Bell's there, I wanted to give a shout out to anybody else that's thinking about going to the Zero Failures business side. Wayne, you have actually, we have completely revamped our business based on what you said, and the dividends are paying off. I told Carice the other night that as of August of last year, I'm finally off the ladder. So that is thanks to Wayne Bell.
Whoop, whoop. And so shameless plug for Business Focus. Again, it's not a Sashco commercial, or none of our Zero Failures classes are. You guys should just know Zero Failures is not a Sashco commercial. It really is in depth. The Business Focus is all about improving your business and getting off the ladder, making that move from being a contractor to an employer to an owner. And Wayne has done a great job of doing that. And then of course, our COO, CFO, Tim, teaches some of that. You guys will have more information coming up on that soon. I am actually trying to get some some classes in here this year. Things are wild. So stay tuned. You'll be hearing more soon, I hope. All right, guys.
One other thing to mention is there's more kinds of media blasters than just what you're looking at. So, I mean, you can do soda blasting, you can do ice blasting, you can do dustless blasting. There's all kinds of different things. So you need to find out what's right for you and,
Right.
into all of that. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Vapor blasting. I'm told that there's a lot less cleanup from vapor blasting.
Not true.
Not well, yeah, okay. So Mark says not true. I haven't tried all of them. Definitely don't do sand blasting. It's a little too harsh. I'll tell you that. But there are lots of different blasters.
Sand has actually been banned by OSHA. Anybody that risks doing that on a job, you're risking hundreds of thousands of dollars in fine.
So
Insurance probably won't cover you either.
no.
Nope.
So just do your research. The people who design these blasters are happy to talk to you about the pros and cons of them and what would work best for you. So we will, like I said, I'll try to coordinate another webinar sometime here in the nearest future to talk a little bit more about that. There's a lot that could be talked about. So feel free to unmute yourselves, and if you have some questions, we've got a few minutes here for Q&A. You can also throw them into the chat if you're more comfortable typing it in. And we'll give Bob and Mark a few minutes to answer questions here. So be quick with those trigger fingers on the mute. I did have one question. Those earlier pictures, and let me go back to them, were of milled logs. And so hang on, I'm going all the way back here. It's gonna take me a hot minute to go through them. Here we go. Those are milled. Oh, see, now I went too far. There we go. Milled logs here.
Mhm.
So the question is, I got to go back to it. What experience do you guys have, Bob and Mark, with those smooth logs changing shape with media blasting? What is the texture going to look like? Is it going to be particularly bad? And what should people expect, I guess, is
Now, for one thing, it's probably going to take all that chatter out of there that their cutters that put in the log. Probably give it a better look, in my opinion. So if you see all those vertical lines up and down there, when they run that log, it might be 8 inches on both ends. It's not a tapered log, in other words. Their machine that does that is probably two things that cause that. One is that the cutters are not at a high enough speed, or they're feeding the log either too slow or too fast. So it needs to be a little adjusted. But getting rid of those lines right there, I mean, you can even see those lines on parts of the logs that are stained properly.
Mhm.
So by taking those out, I mean, that's kind of a neat thing. So that's one thing that I would talk to that homeowner about, the advantage of leaving a rough log and sandblasting. Hey, we'll get rid of these chatter marks for you.
So Bob, I don't know, am I off mute? Can you hear me?
I can
Yep.
hear you.
So I'm actually the one that asked the question. We're up here in Grand County in Colorado.
Mhm.
And we did this on a house, and I didn't do the blasting. I had a subcontractor that did the blasting. And if you see the kind of where the grains of the wood are kind of swirling through, the softwood got ate out and left like varicose veins of the harder grain, and it wasn't acceptable. I mean, so you talk about removing some of the chatter marks. We created this thing that looked like some old lady's leg up there with varicose veins everywhere. And we then ended up spending an enormous amount of time sanding, trying to push those higher hard grains down.
Yeah,
And
what you're seeing, there's the growth rings. So that's the growth rings on the tree. So, there's hard grain and there's soft grain. So you're blasting that soft grain out. And then the hard grain is actually staying on there. So that actually, more movement to that blaster when you're blasting is going to take care of some of that. But still, you may have to go back and you may have to do some sanding. It's always a good idea to do a test area first, see what it's like, talk that over between the contractor and the homeowner before you continue. And sometimes you have to take a little bit of the evil to get rid of the problem. And you know, you're going to be taking off a little bit of wood in some cases, especially if the product sticks on hard. But what you really want to do is you want to make sure the expectations are made very clear at the beginning of that job, during that test, of what the expectations are there. I tell guys to do that all the time because some houses are going to require some sanding. Some guys don't bid sanding. Some homeowners don't know they have to sand even after sandblasting to get rid of some of the ribs. And that's just left by hard grain and soft grain. And a lot of times, you know, wood species does that. You know, spruce is very susceptible to that. Spruce trees are something that's susceptible to that. Another one is red pine. Eastern red pine is also susceptible to that. White pine, not so much. Cedar, not so much. Oak, not very much. So different wood species, that you create that more in different wood species than others.
So
Right.
one of the things I'll bring up too, I know we've mentioned the Osborne brush quite a bit tonight. Sometimes with that hardwood, Osbornes are not aggressive enough.
They're normally
There
not.
is I think it's called the Log Hog, which is it's a metal grinding disc that does better with some of that harder wood. It's more expensive. You got to use a little bit more. You have to, I mean, obviously, again, you have to practice somewhere where people aren't going to see it to see how it's going to take it down. But there are other grinder attachments out there that might do a better job.
So we
taking some
actually
of that
used,
hardwood down if you need to.
yeah, we actually ended up using a flap disc on, you know, on a 4.5-inch grinder. I mean, it's intended for steel, you know, it's a steel
Right.
finishing tool, but it was at, you know, a 60 grit or an 80 grit. It was more effective than sanding. The Osborne brush didn't touch that. And it definitely, but again, you had to be a little cautious because it'd get after the wood too at the same time.
And I'm gonna echo what Jared, what Bob said. And most of the biggest problem you had there was technique. The guy that blasted for you really didn't know what he was doing. And then the one negative I will say about blasting is if you're doing a peeled log exterior, a lot of people like the draw knife looks. It's definitely going to flatten those draw knife looks out. So you've got to manage the expectation of the customer, explain what we're doing, why, you know, so it removes the tooling marks, which reminds me, I can't tell you how many houses we've been on where we've seen somebody take an orbital disc, you know, a grinder, and you see swirl marks all over the place. So I don't like seeing any kind of tool marks.
We have had some guys on the hand peeled who they go and, you know, they'll blast everything off or power wash everything off, and they'll go back in with draw knives and
That's hard work.
put them back in there. But you know, if the homeowner wants it and they're willing to pay for it, that's oftentimes the solution and the faster one versus just, you know, trying to hand sand everything and risking swirl marks, like you said. Jeremy has a question. Bob, Mark, Wayne, I'm sure you can jump in and talk about this too. How to go about finding good business insurance that covers the blasting? A lot of providers don't want to provide that coverage because of blasting.
Totally agree. I've seen that all the time. And one thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you make it clear to your insurance company that you're not using sand to blast. Sand is what made a big dent in the industry as far as the insurance is. Again, they're worried about damage to property, and they're also worried about damage to employees from breathing and stuff like that. So silica sand was a big thing. It's better to have the name of your company, something media blasting instead of sand blasting. So sand blasting is the key. Don't use the word sandblasting. A lot of insurance companies, as soon as they see that, they say no. You have to be very clear with your insurance company when getting estimates. Let them know what you're going to be using. Let them know that you're going to be using, soft medias, glass, things like that, and the type of work that you're going to be doing. Most guys that are in the sandblast business are blasting concrete. They're blasting steel structures. They're blasting bridges. Concrete, masonry, paint, things like that where there's lead. you want to let them know you're in the log home industry and that's what you're doing. They're
Just to
also
be-
going to want to know, are you working 8 foot off the ground or are you working 28 feet off the ground? Makes a big, big difference. So if you're using scaffold and you're up higher, they're going to, you're going to pay a higher risk for doing that as well.
Just to be very clear, in September of 2019, OSHA basically banned the use of sand because of free silica, unless you completely contain the job. It's basically right up there with the same techniques you got to use for lead abatement. So there's very few, I'd say, legal blasters using sand anymore.
There's am I online?
Yes, you are. Thanks, Wayne, for jumping in.
Thanks for the invite. There is a pressure washing group called Power Washers of North America. It's a trade organization for people that use power washers. There's at least one major insurer who advertises heavily to that group, and they've been receptive to issuing insurance for people like us, including media people.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll try to get that, I'll try to include that information in the email follow-up next week. That includes the recording to this, so you guys all have that information. So,
Wayne?
Hey guys,
Real quick.
Mark, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, we can. Hi, Travis.
Question. Hey, quick question. What's your guys' standard prep method for new construction? I know it varies species to species, but around here we have a lot of fir, and for whatever reason, there's always a lot of mill glaze. And so a lot of clients get to the point where they put it up. They don't really realize that they still need to prep before stain. So we see a lot of folks just toss stain on there and it, flakes off. And we've always just sanded it down or like pushed to do that. But do you guys actually go and pepper it with the blast media and then stain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I do as well. It's easier and faster for me to run over that with a very mild glass bead, like
Yep.
I was talking about the rounded bleeds, than it is to go through with guys and sanding labor wise. And it doesn't take long to do. You're just getting that surface roughed up enough to hold texture for the stain to stick.
On a new log home like that, we'd use a 5100 grit glass. And again, you're not stripping anything. You're just removing the mill glaze. You're probably looking at 1,500 square feet an hour when you're blasting. There's nobody that sands that fast.
Right. I agree.
One
Steve-
more question with the glass. You guys, so for us, we push walnut mainly because clients have like a lot of pushback from glass media. Like they hear, I'm always up front, like, hey, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to come inside. Just be prepared. We can mask inside and whatnot, but just be ready. And for them, like when they hear glass, like they kind of freak out. They're like, oh no, like how do you alleviate those concerns that clients have?
You can actually just bring them an MSDS of it. It's a straight up nuisance dust. It's probably the most inert abrasive on the market.
And
Yep.
do you just
And-
make sure your suppliers? So also another thing I've heard is like suppliers, some are pretty sketchy and like they don't really control what exactly gets in the media, the glass media. Whereas like walnut is just pure walnut shell, are you particular with where you get your product and kind of vet that a little bit?
Yeah, not all glass is the same. It all comes from different places. So personally, we only buy premium product, which is what we sell to people like Mark Nelson. And if they say the MSDS is squeaky clean, it truly is.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then another thing you got to remember about organics like walnut and everything else. First of all, it's more expensive. It cuts slower. You're going to use twice as much. And it also is food for varmints. Everybody back in the day, I started out with cob and everybody said, oh, it'll eventually degrade. Well, not for 5 or 10 years. Meanwhile, you're drawing in mice and everything else. I just absolutely won't use any of the organics anymore.
And with the glass, do you see the same levels of dust as you would with corn, or is it actually less dust?
It's less dust. It's
I
less
agree.
dust.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark, that it is less dust.
Yeah, and we only use the glass in our zero failures anymore. And it's a lot less dust inside that tent because we do everything. Everybody gets their own log wall and we do everything inside of a tent. It's a ventilated tent, but we do most of the classes in the wintertime. So it has to be in a tent. And we moved away from cob years ago. It's just so much better using the glass. So
So a neat little test to do is grab a handful of those walnut shells and go put them outside in your lawn in a nice little pile and
Yep.
wait till they get wet and wait till they get rained on a little bit and you'll start a little mushroom farm and then you'll change your mind.
And Travis, another thing we do, a big thing is just take a sample of the glass with you when you meet with the clients. Because I can't tell you how many people, when you tell them you're going to use glass, they're thinking there's going to be shards of glass all over their yard.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, the biggest thing that's held us back from going to glass is the masking of the windows. But you mentioned, you just obviously leave it up all the way till the end of the job. And that's kind of appealing.
Exactly.
So you're not really losing that time. Yeah.
It is more involved with masking. We just have accepted it because it makes then blasting so much faster. I don't need to use any shields. We don't use anything. It's just, we just go to blasting. But then again, if the masking holds up, and that's part of it, it needs to hold up through blasting, and then you're ready. We turn right around and start spraying immediately.
right.
I'm going to try it out. I'll do part of a wall with walnut next time and part of a wall with glass.
I wouldn't recommend that. I would not recommend that. You're
It'll
going to
be
get a
different.
little different texture. Everything's going to be, a little bit different. Either try a whole job or don't do it at all. Don't do half
Yep.
and half on a wall.
Yep.
Yeah. Another thing
That's
that
the
like
same
people always
kind of
talk-
situation, you're gonna run into the same kind of situation if you got one guy doing half a wall and he goes to lunch and another guy comes in, he does the other half a wall, you're gonna see a difference between the two people putting the application on. Stain's gonna be a little lighter, a little darker. You're gonna see difference, one guy on one wall.
Yep, I just to hit on that, I had a customer, this is Renee, sorry, hi, everybody. I had a customer that him and his wife were both staining their home and she did the bottom half and he did the top half. It was actually quite comical. So he was pretty upset that she did it right and he did not, because he did not add enough stain at all. So you can definitely see the difference if you have two different people doing one wall, for
And
sure.
are they still married?
I wasn't going to ask that question, but his wife was pretty happy when I told her she was doing it the right way.
Yes.
If your marriage can make it through that, it could probably make it through most anything. So, hey, y'all, I'm going to call it a night. We've been on for an hour and a half. You can see Mark and Bob's and my information here on the screen. Feel free to, reach out to us if you have questions to talk shop. I'm not going to guarantee that everybody is always available. Mark, did I get your phone number right on here?
2146.
I've just looked at it. This
I
is
just
sad.
did
I should know that. I will correct that when I send
Give
out
them-
the
Give them
email.
the 2149 number. It might be somebody that knows more than I'm doing.
I know I'm a little bit embarrassed about that. I'm sorry about that. You guys can see my blank screen for a minute. Hang on a second while I put myself back into play mode and you can see my screen again. Hopefully you
There you go.
the corrected number now. There you go. It's corrected. 2146. Sleight of hand. Thank you guys all for being here, for sticking with us for an hour and a half. I will post this to YouTube for those who have the time to geek out for an hour and a half. We have another webinar coming up next week, all about operational excellence, the improvements that we're going to be talking about, some of the improvements Sashco's made to our business over the last year. But that's going to be more of an open forum. Let everybody be there to participate and talk about the things that you've done to make things more efficient. Because at the end of the day, we all know it's hard to find people to work right now. And so you have to find the time and cost savings in process improvement. So we're going to be talking about that and giving you a little bit of a taste of what we discuss in Business Focus. So plan to join us for that next Thursday, same time, same place. And we will be sure that we record that. So, someone raised their hand.
Oh, that's probably my wife, Mary. And real quick, Wayne, she was actually my first employee. So you imagine a marriage surviving that?
I'm happy you're still together.
Okay.
Me too.
All right, all. Hey, thanks so much for being here. We will hope to see you guys next week. Have a great evening. Go get some dinner or put your kids to bed, what have you. Thanks all.
Good night, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Really
everyone.
appreciate it.